historian.
Hey guys, Steve the Amateur Historian here, and I look absolutely ridiculous with the long hair and a dress shirt. I look like a pothead who's going to his first interview in a long time, who's just doing what he can to be impressive. But I'm here because, as I mentioned in a prior video I am doing a film that focuses very much around someone who does urban exploration. And a big piece, spoiler alert, is I'm channeling some of my personal experience, and the lead makes a decision going to one particular site to evade no trespassing signs and to just go in and make her video. She feels that wrong is worth it to video this place. That was the logic me and my friend followed when we visited a certain location and videoed inside. There were no trespassing signs there. We knew it, and we made the decision to go in anyway, and we got caught and we got in trouble. So I'm here to talk about how messed up trespass laws are. Not because I'm butthurt because me and my friend got caught and got in trouble. That was 100%, we knew the risk going in. And the moment we found out that there was a complaint being made against us, we were literally at the police station within the hour trying to move things forward. And we went to court. We accepted the consequences. There was no complaining. I still to this day think the people that made the complaint against us were just assholes who were embarrassed. But when all that was happening, I didn't really have much of a grasp at all on trespassing law. I've actually just educated myself more, and I've looked at the statutes for the state of Oregon, which are fairly representative of how things are around the country. And it's just really absurd. It's particularly absurd that a derelict property that hasn't been maintained by its actual owner for years, they don't have to put up any kind of signage, anything that says no trespassing, private property, or even just a fence. Something that says, hey, we don't want people coming in here, even though the property looks completely justifiably abandoned. I'm not saying you have to put private property signs up in front of your house that you live in the city that clearly somebody is living in, but it's absurd that you can let a property just be derelict and then somebody walks in there and you find out about it and you can make a claim against them when there's no clear evidence of any kind that somebody lives here. I just think that's absolutely insane. Most of the statutes for trespassing law are non-existent. Is this much of a page when you read it. There's just, a couple little statutes and like one sentence. When I looked up, the trespassing laws, I think the state of Oregon, there was more about not parking your vehicle on somebody's property than there was about just trespassing law in general. Do you know that there's a law out there? I'm sure it's a very complicated law, and I'm sure there's a lot of drama that happens when the case comes about, but there was a law that if somebody owns a property that they are not maintaining and it goes long enough without being maintained, someone can walk onto the property and just move in and live in the house, and they can technically take ownership of the property after a certain amount of time. So that exists, and yet if I wander onto the same property, even after the same amount of time has passed and I shoot a video and the owner stumbles onto that video, I can get into legal trouble just for walking onto the property. I have no intention of breaking into anybody's home, obviously. I have no intention of violating laws. The instance me and my friend got in trouble for was a one-time thing. But if I'm out in the middle of the sticks, in the middle of nowhere, and I find a completely falling apart abandoned place that presumably is safe enough to go into, and I'm an adventurer, and it looks like it hasn't been maintained in years, I'm gonna go in there and shoot video. So is any other explorer, if there is no evidence that this belongs to anybody. It's absurd that you can get it, and certainly you can make the claim of ignorance. Like, there was nothing here that suggested anybody remotely owned this place, but you still have to deal with getting the complaint. You still have to deal with going to court. It's just a friggin' joke. What is particularly a joke, as I looked up the statutes for civil law and criminal law for the state of Oregon, and the sources are, updated as of 2018, so this is recent. And I know statutes change all the time. But the fact of the matter is, a lot of these statutes were established, and a lot of time has passed wherein these could have been changed. Civil law statutes. The longest statute of limitation I noticed for criminal law and civil law, with the exception of like murder, and I know rape. The lowest statute, I think, is 6 years, and it goes up to having no statute, I guess, depending on the level of the crime, even though rape is rape. I don't think there should ever be a statute of limitation on any crime wherein one human being harms another one, of course, with the exception of self-defense. But I looked up the civil law statutes because that's what trespassing falls under. It's a Class C misdemeanor. So trespassing gets that maximum. The statute of limitations on trespassing in the state of Oregon, I don't know how it is in the rest of the country, but in the state of Oregon, the trespassing statute is 6 years. That means 6 years after you commit your act. If you walk onto some property, you can still get in trouble for it 6 years later. You can literally go all the way through high school, be halfway through college, and still get in trouble for something you did after you finished middle school. Libel and slander has a 1-year statute of limitation. Literally, like, the written misrepresentation of someone that could literally affect them for the rest of their life, considering how media, we take media for granted, so many of us do. That's 1 year. Assault and battery, 2 years statute of limitations. Wrongful death, 3 years. And the rest of these I'm going to list off under civil law are all 2-year statute of limitations. Fraud, false imprisonment, personal injury, medical malpractice, and legal malpractice. These are very serious acts. And with the exception of maybe the personal injury and wrongful death sections, these other ones, false imprisonment, legal malpractice, medical malpractice, fraud, assault and battery, those 98% of the time, those are intentional acts, or those are acts of complete and total negligence, and yet they all carry 2-year statute of limitations, which means you have to bring a case within 2 years. Now, I understand those are more, obviously much more legally significant than trespassing, so going to court is going to be a more complicated scenario, but how in the hell can you say that somebody walking onto somebody's property, even if it's completely derelict and there's no signs that anybody owns it, how can you say that that person should be that much less protected? This alone shows statute of limitation law protects serious offenders, not necessarily violent offenders, but very serious offenders, people who commit libel and malpractice and false imprisonment, wrongful death, drunk drivers. Can't have a 3-year statute of limitation while trespassing in 60. People that commit very serious acts are more protected than somebody who wanders onto somebody's property. Somebody who literally gets drunk as shit and accidentally hits... Well, actually, I'm sorry. That's wrong. That's manslaughter. I'm a dummy. But wrongful death is a very serious thing. That's where somebody fucks up and it leads to somebody's death. So my mind went straight to drunk driving. So sorry about that. Backtrack. Get rid of that crap. I know somebody's going to stop this video right there and leave a comment. Dude, freaking drunk driving accidents is not wrongful death. I got it. But you see my point. So, and then you go into criminal law. Assault, 2 to 3 year statute of limitation. Burglary, 3 years. Robbery, 3 to 6. So in most cases, probably less than trespassing. Same for theft, 2 to 3 or possibly 6 years for probably something very, very serious. Kidnapping, fucking kidnapping, 3 years. There's a 3-year statute of limitation. You have 3 years to bust a kidnapper. But if you trespass, you have 6 years. And I don't really care. I don't really care that those are more significant crimes, and thus they more affect they should affect the lives of the people who commit them more because they're more serious crimes. It's absurd that you should be able to get somebody who trespasses into trouble after so much more time passes than some. There should absolutely not be a statute of limitations on fucking kidnapping or assault. But there is in the state of Oregon, and hopefully that changes. But, and I don't care. I don't buy the whole nonsense well, they're more complicated cases, so the period has to be shorter. What if somebody kidnaps somebody and that person doesn't find out who they are and it takes 10 years down the road before they figure out who the kidnapper is? That person can walk away from it. And that's insane. But I could do an exploration video where I go to a site that looks like it's not owned. Now, again, I openly admit the one time I did trespass and get caught for it, I acknowledge that I was trespassing. But again, I'm talking in the concept of you can go onto a derelict property that still may be privately owned, which means you can get in just as much trouble for it. I could go onto a property like that that has no signs that anybody owns it. Clearly, nobody gives a shit about it, and I can shoot a cool video and put it on YouTube. I don't steal anything from the home, committing theft, which is so weird that, like, if I did an exploration video and then stole a bunch of stuff from the place I was exploring, the statute of limitations of just going in there is longer than me actually taking a bunch of stuff, people's private property. The statute's longer. That's just so fucked up to me. But it's ridiculous that I can just go into a place, shoot an exploration video, commit no further crimes. I'm not going there to do illicit drugs. I'm not going there to tag the place, break windows or anything. No vandalism, no robbery, nothing. Just a video that I can post on YouTube and show people, hey, look at this cool, abandoned, clearly, place that I found out here. And then, the owner can randomly find out about that 5 years later, and I can still get in trouble for it. But if a kidnapper or someone who commits an assault goes unfound or unseen for years, and then they're finally caught, in some cases they can go free. And the wording is very weird, but when I actually looked up, like, the concept of statute of limitations, they express that it's from when the act occurs. Now, maybe there's certain laws where that differs, but from what I read, the statute of limitation begins when the act is committed, which means if assault is 2 to 3 years, let's say this is a case that gets you a 3-year statute of limitation, that means 3 years from when the assault occurs, which means if you don't find this person for 5 years, they can get off. But you find somebody who trespassed, and that's all they did 5 years later, you can get in serious trouble for it. And it's just insane. And I actually looked up the purpose of statute of limitations. Maybe there's going to be some explanation in there as to why people that do such worse things have a smaller window to get prosecuted for. What is the primary purpose of a statute of limitations? To protect defendants, meaning the accused. So apparently somebody who trespasses, which is such a nothing crime, it's a Class C misdemeanor, which is like as low as it goes. So statute of limitations is to protect defendants. So a person who commits a nothing crime, like trespassing, again, presuming they don't commit any other crimes, they're just an explorer like me, gets less protection. The longer the statute is, the less the accused is protected. I mean, that's just fact. So, according to the concept of statute of limitations, somebody who trespasses just walks onto a property. I could walk onto their lawn, look through a window, and leave. Technically, that can be trespassing. I'm less protected than somebody who commits assault, libel, malpractice, false imprisonment, wrongful death, burglary, robbery, theft, kidnapping. I'm sorry, that's the one that really gets me, is kidnapping. Kidnapping and assault. I'm less protected as a defendant than somebody who abducts another human being, than someone who assaults someone, outside of rape. Somebody who robs someone who pulls a gun on somebody and says, give me your stuff or I'm going to kill you. I'm less protected than that person. False imprisonment. I'm less protected than somebody who does that. Somebody who goes out and libel and slander, somebody who literally goes onto media and misrepresents people. People have committed suicide over being misrepresented. In more cases on social media, which is an example of, libel and slander. That's a very serious crime. And yet these people who commit much more serious crimes, much more nefarious crimes, crimes that predominantly are done with intent of some sort, they're, in some cases 3 times more protected by the concept of statute of limitations than a trespasser. It's fucking insane. There should at least be Like the concept of theft, where 2 years, 3 years, or 6 years, there should be a differentiation. If you're trespassing with the intent of further nefarious acts, again, vandalism, you're gonna just live in there, whatever. You're just like, I'm gonna live in this place and no one's gonna stop me. The worst of all cases, those should have a longer statute of limitation because it's a more serious crime. Somebody who does an exploration video, that statute of limitation should be very small because there's barely a crime even being committed. Everybody I've talked to, the officer that me and my friend talked to literally said, this is stupid. I'm sorry you're even having to deal with this, guys. Like, I know you guys broke the law. I watched the video you guys shot and I actually thought it was really cool. The officer that gave us our citation literally he was consistently apologetic to us for having to cite us for committing a crime. Misdemeanor, which, by the way, got lowered to a violation, so we still don't have a criminal record. So the people that had to get all butthurt about us shooting a really cool video, they didn't get their way. It's really sad when you commit a crime, and yet at the end of the day, when you look at our conduct and then the conduct of the people that filed the complaint against us, and they're the bad guys, it's unfortunate. But there was also 3 primary reasons given as to why statutes of limitations are the way they are, the lengths they are. So I was thinking, okay, maybe in here I'll find something that'll explain why these serious crimes have a smaller window than trespassing. First thing, plaintiff, or the victim, with a case should pursue with diligence, meaning, the moment this happens, they shouldn't sit on their ass. Which is true, I would think, for small cases like trespassing when it's not really that serious of a thing. But even if you're lackadaisical or you take forever to take a case to court, if it's a serious case, I don't feel like that's justification enough to say, oh, well, you took too long. Assault, if you take too long, I don't feel like that's a good enough reason to let somebody off. Kidnapping, theft, wrongful death, I don't feel like that's a good enough reason. I understand it, but... Second explanation, the defendant, again, the accused, could lose, essentially, if enough time passes, they could lose or misplace possible evidence that they could use to protect themselves. Again, the concept of statute of limitations is to help protect the defendants. Essentially, they could lose evidence to defend themselves over time, if too much time passes by. Okay, I understand that too, but I don't feel like that's explanation enough to justify these very serious cases. I don't feel like trespassers should be considerably less protected because of that. I feel like that's something that should just apply to every type of case. And in that vein, the more serious it is, the longer the statute is. That's not enough either. Last one. Also, litigations of old claims. If you're bringing a case that happened 20 years ago to court, which happens, with unsolved murders and stuff, because those are serious enough. Litigations of old claims could lead to more cruelty than justice. Essentially, they're trying not to. I read this in another source. They're essentially trying to not punish people for stuff they did years before. If a lot of time has passed, we want to acknowledge the fact that people can change. Well, if that's the fact, then why is there such an egregiously high statute of limitations for people who are trespassing, barely committing a crime at all? It's just all the explanations for what a statute of limitations is and why they have it doesn't make sense for the state of Oregon when one of the longest statute of limitations they have is for trespassing. It's just... It's so stupid. It's ridiculous. There was no reason why trespassing should be that much longer. You should have that much more time than people who commit serious and nefarious crimes. So, I don't know. See, and that's something I want to... Again, I was talking about how I'm making a movie about someone who trespasses. And I'm not trying to make the lead character look like a perfectly innocent little angel. I show that they knew what they were doing. And that they're having to accept the consequences. But also that, just because you break a law doesn't make you a shitty person. All right, I'm in my early 30s. This this trespassing claim that was made against me, first time I've ever had to go to civil court, criminal court essentially. I mean, because it was technically a crime. First time I've ever had to go there. And me and my friend both didn't have criminal records, and we've been around long enough to where if we were really screwed up people, we would have had at least a few dings on our record by now. So we got off with a violation because of the fact that, even the prosecutor and the judge acknowledged we don't have time for this. These guys didn't do anything that bad. These guys aren't hard-bitten criminals. And again, I'm not using that to explain away what we did, but I'm not going to suffer horrendous guilt till the day I die because I decided to ignore a no trespassing sign on a property that had been uninhibited for like 5 years. With the exception of the security people there who clearly sucked at their job because me and my friend were not exactly stealthy when we were in there. But those are the kind of things I want to address with this actual film that I'm making about someone who explores around and experiences that whole thing of going onto a private property and somebody finding out and her being in a position similar to my own and having to kind of deal with that. And it goes much beyond that. It's very much a character piece. You see who this character is, because that's absolutely necessary for a film. Otherwise, you're like, why am I watching this? Why is this person doing what they're doing? I have no investment in this. Change the channel. Take the DVD out. Find something new on Netflix. So these are the kind of things that I do want to address. This is not going to be a social message film. I'm not going to spend half the film saying, did you know that in this, did you know in our country, because you get too much into that and it's a put off, at least it is for me. When it becomes blatantly clear that you're just getting on your soapbox and your film is revolving around you putting out your personal agenda, that's when it starts becoming less of a film and more of just a piece for you to spout off how you feel. But this is all still going to be addressed in my film because it's stuff that directly affects the lead character. And the lead character, as an explorer, is someone who has tried to educate themselves in terms of trespassing, because that's always a possibility when you're out there exploring, no matter what kind of place you go to, especially with the way laws are. And the fact that you can go onto a property that has no signs that it's being maintained and no signs that anybody doesn't want anybody there, but you could still perceivably be trespassing, and you wouldn't even know. And you got to deal with the consequences of that. And sometimes that's valid, but a lot of times it's just a bunch of bullshit. So again, I've got the script done, the rough draft, and I'm kind of going through and perfecting it. I'm just starting to take auditions, so we're getting to the ending portion of the pre-production phase, and I'm hoping to start shooting on this thing by the end of the month. And since it's February 20th, I mean, we're talking a week, maybe two. I'm gonna have my camera. Where's my freaking? I don't know. My camera's around here somewhere. So that's upcoming, and that's gonna be. I'm gonna be obviously talking about that. I'll probably post a few videos, on the scene as we're filming it, all that cool stuff, so you guys can see this film, as it's coming together, and hopefully it'll be all done by, hopefully by the end of March, and then I can have a product done by the start of summer and start spreading that around. That's my objective as of right now in February. But yeah, I just got a wild hankering to sit down and start talking about this statute of limitations stuff that just, try as I might, taking in all the possible reasons for why this is exactly the way it is, I still just don't get the 6-year time span in the state of Oregon for statute of limitations. I know I've looked at other states. It's, 1 year, 2 years, so it's not the whole country that's like this. And, again, statute of limitations are changing all the time, but it seems like that's trespassing when you've got, sexual assaults and fraud and slander and kidnapping and things like that to deal with. I don't feel like altering trespassing statutes is probably very high on the list for, the people that, pretty much Oregon Congress and things like that. So I don't really see it changing anytime soon, but, here's to hoping. Anyway, till next time, guys, this has been Steve the Amateur Historian.